Thunderf00t made a video about feminism again. Let's go into why it's wrong.
Starts with the Huffington Post and this great tweet from its executive editor. Notice anything about the Huffington Post editors meeting? Girl, power, power. Naturally, it was hilarious how this tweet got absolutely raped by the permanently triggered, who were just outraged about how white everyone was. And sure, the all-black women's editor team was so quick to point out how less sexist and racist it was to have all-black women editors rather than all-white women editors. So the chances of the Huffington Post not being sexist in their choice of editors is about 1 in 14,000. Yay, go equality! Is one of those female-heavy subjects with almost 2 women doing it for every man. I know, gender equality is only sexist oppression when it's a male-heavy subject, and then the only reason that it can be a male-heavy subject is because of the patriarchy. But one of the funniest things here is when you just look at what this Huffington Post female leadership has done for the company. I mean, I'm no expert in this media thing, but maybe, just maybe, this is happening because your paper keeps running these great articles on things about how women are finally no longer oppressed because they are equally represented by emojis.
So, the fulcrum of this video is the assumption that Huffington Post is sexist towards men. Thunderf00t saw a photo of a bunch of women editors and assumed that the Huffington Post doesn't have any male editors, when all one need do is go to their website and click on the About Us link to see male editors. If you count all the editors and separate them by, women versus men, the majority of editors are women. But it's not 100%, as Thunderf00t claims in the description bar and bemoans about. Therefore, Thunderf00t's claim Thunderf00t's claim of sexism being perpetuated against men at the Huffington Post is logically fallacious, and he fails to prove that men are oppressed in the newsroom/journalism workplace, especially given that, quote, 73% of the top management jobs are occupied by men compared to 27% of the jobs occupied by women. Now, the point of the black female editors sending that pic in response to Liz Heron's pic was to highlight that although newsrooms have made some strides towards more inclusivity, lots of work still remains to be done. And according to the very same report by the Women's Media Center, the ASNE found that, quote, black women staffers slightly lost ground compared to black men.
Oh, you can taste the irony. Yeah, that's Emma Gray with her degree in sociology, sexual diversity studies and political science, and Zeba Bay with her degree in cultural criticism, chastising everyone else for being privileged. And just so you know, that's the exact same new school that just gave Anita Sarkeesian an honorary degree. Well, what do you know? Small world. A small and rather nepotistic world. But anyway, honestly, if you've got the cash to blow on a do-nothing, worthless degree like cultural criticism. It doesn't matter how black your skin is. You've just waived the right to call anyone else privileged.
Okay, so Thunderf00t is taking issue with these two young ladies, Zeba Blay and Emma Gray, who they made a video for the HuffPost going into why white feminism, aka mainstream feminism, is a problem these days. But it seems more like Thunderf00t has issues with them because the women have degrees in backgrounds he doesn't like, you know, like sociology and cultural, ethnic, or gender studies, etc. He also makes a logical fallacy via implying, you know, correlation equals causation, something like that, regarding Zeba Blay getting her degree from the New School, who just happened to give Anita Sarkeesian an honorary degree. Now, colleges and universities give honorary degrees to certain people all the time, but, you know, screw all that, because when all else fails, always find a way to link it back to Anita Sarkeesian, because logic? So, according to Thunderf00t, if a black person or any person of a marginalized group gets a degree in a field of study he considers do nothing and worthless, apparently they cease to be marginalized and they can no longer voice criticism over said marginalization. So, hear that, black people? If you don't get a degree in a field, you know, the supreme arbiter of valuable degrees Phil Mason deems worthwhile, and as well as, you know, be rich or happen to come from a family that has some money, apparently you cease to deal with any and all sorts of racial oppression and inequalities.
So hung up on this notion that we have some obligation to help this struggling black man, you know, cut him some slack until he can overcome these historical injustices. It's crap. This stuff you guys are saying just perpetuates it. All this liberal nonsense, you know, everyone's turning and looking the other way while our country rots from the inside out. And Christ, Lincoln freed the slaves, what, like 130 years ago? How long does it take to get your act together?
White feminism aims to close the wage gap between men and women. But what it fails to recognize is that most of the time, Latina and black women make even less than white women.
And the great examples they chose were George Clooney, net worth 180 million, Julia Roberts, net worth 140 million, Salma Hayek, net worth 80 million, and Beyonce, net worth 450 million. Yeah, a black woman can be so oppressed these days that they're completely prohibited from being worth more than a white man, white woman, and Latina woman doing the same work combined. And honestly, Salma Hayek, with her mere 80 million net worth, is beyond the dreams of most of us oppressing white males.
Oh my God. Okay, so look. Those celebrities were chosen as stand-ins for white men, white women, Latina women, and black women in general. They're not to be the end-all, be-all representative of those groups as a whole. So this entire segment here is a non sequitur. I'm wondering if that went right over Thunderf00t's head, or if he's just being willfully obtuse for his audience. My experience interacting with him on social media kind of leads me to think the latter.
And yeah, I also noticed that you forgot to include Asians in your little infographic, because it completely ruins your narrative about whites and males oppressing everyone.
White feminism aims to close the wage gap between men and women. But what it fails to recognize is that most of the time, Latina and black women make even less than white women.
Because whites only get paid about 80 cents on the dollar for an Asian. Yeah, that's a pay gap that no one has any interest in closing. Odd that, isn't it?
Oh dear. In regards to the gender wage gap and Asians being left out of that video, the graph doesn't refute the status quo of people of color being paid less. It doesn't even refute the existence of a gender pay gap within the Asian American group. So Thunderfoot's own source refutes him. Now, granted, when looking at annual earnings of Asian Americans, they do end up making more than white people on the surface, but Thunderfoot doesn't bother wondering why those weekly earnings are so high, because all he sees is a gotcha against feminism, a gotcha that doesn't really exist. All it really does is actually open up a can of worms about that good old racist construct, the model minority myth. But still, why are those earning numbers so high? Well, according to Asian Nation, a probable reason that the earnings of Asian Americans are higher is because, quote, in cases, the typical Asian American family tends to have more members who are working than the typical white family. It's not unusual for an Asian American family to have 4, 5, or more members working. Another probable reason is that, quote, Asian Americans are much more likely to concentrate in metropolitan areas where the cost of living is much higher. Also, another thing to keep in mind is that while some Asian Americans groups have prospered, other Asian American groups have not fared so well. And on the whole, Asian Americans still continue to face prejudice and discrimination, just like other peoples of color. But Thunderfoot doesn't give these factors any thought whatsoever, only looking on the surface. And in doing so, he not only perpetuates his ideological narrative of post-racial colorblindness, which is a form of racism, by the way, but also shows him perpetuating the model minority myth about Asian Americans to push this rising narrative of white people being oppressed more than people of color. Oh yes, much rationality, such logic in perpetuating racist propaganda. I'm sure the authors of The Bell Curve would be proud.
Feminism definitely has its issues, as does any movement or any ideology, but not for the reasons that Thunderfoot says. The only real problem in his video is he just continues to assert very uninformed and quite honestly very bigoted opinions without any foundation of knowledge. And I'm wondering if it's because, you know, for all his videos and shit, like, I think Thunderfoot is actually jealous because people who he feels have degrees in areas which he thinks are worthless have contributed more to society than he has, with all of his videos about how feminism is bad and how bad of a person Anita Sarkeesian is and all of that. Seriously, think about it. Has he actually done anything that benefits society in any way? You know, like, has his catalog of videos and whatever lab experiments he's done, has it led to anything substantial, like encouraging the FBI to broaden its definition of rape to include men as victims? Has his video catalog and all the work he's done in labs over the years, has it encouraged world governments to take climate change seriously? Has his work had any effect in encouraging, you know, public policy changes and legislation that affect people on a real-time basis? Anything like that? Has anything he's ever done ever led to any substantial contributions to society? Yes? No? Fancy that.